Down here are the basic colors that you have in your kit, a couple of the upscale colors or different colors that were optional in the kit as well. And I'll show you how to mix and blend some of this a little differently than the other tutorial. You guys have looked at the color wheel, you've created a color wheel. I just wanted to show you this one, I'll post it. This is a color wheel. It does have the names of all the colors on it, so if you want some of the specifics in terms of calling colors vermilion rather than an orange red and so on, then you'll have that. Not something that you have to learn, but it's there for you if you want to. The color wheel we want to look at is basically this right now, because what happens with this color wheel is you have the primary colors, okay, but at the same time you have them going with the addition of black and then the addition of white on the outside. So this is a kind of a good color wheel to work with. We haven't done a lot with the color wheel, but I just want to suggest that when you're choosing colors from the color wheel, it's basically there's some really foolproof systems in terms of how to do that. One is if you just take a color and you choose it, you go straight across from it, that's your complementary color. So it's always across from one color in the color wheel. That's what we're going to use today as complements. Rather than just mix up a brown or something like that, we're going to kind of choose some colors and try to create them in here and get as close as we can to the complements. The other way to create a color composition that's going to work is called a triadic color composition. That would basically be almost like you put a triangle right on the color wheel and you get 3 points that are equidistant from one another. That would be a triadic color combination. Okay, and again, you move that triangle anywhere in the color wheel. Those 3 colors are going to work pretty well together regardless of which ones you choose, as long as you do the triadic. Quadratic would be like putting a square in here, bigger or smaller square, and then turning that. And then you would have 4 colors equidistant on the color wheel from one another. And then you could spin that around, enlarge it, and shrink it down. And that would give you 4 colors that really will match and will work together well in terms of your color composition. So spend some time looking at the color wheel. Colormatters.com is a good site to go on and read about color, so I'll post that as well. Okay, what we want to do today is we want to look at complementary colors. Okay, so what I want you to do is take your colors out and try to choose a color that you like in the color wheel. Okay, and it could be the green, it could be sort of a pink color or something like that. I'm probably going to go towards a blue-green and then go right across, and I'm going to have sort of a pinkish red. Okay, and that's how you'll choose your colors. And basically what we'll do with that is we'll use those colors plus black plus white to create a range of colors on our composition. But the bottom line is that what you want to do is you want to look at complementary colors today, colors that are opposite one another on the color wheel. So 2 colors, we're going to mix up those 2 distinct colors, and then we can use those and mix those together as we go along. And then we add black and white to see what happens with that. We don't normally darken colors necessarily with black. We don't necessarily lighten them with white, because what you end up getting is a different color rather than a darker version of that color. Usually you use the complement itself to darken the color. Maybe with a Okay, so again, one I'll use just to kind of get the brunt of the material off the brush. The other one I'll use as a final cleanup or for adding water to the drawing. Okay. Now, again, I think you guys have been going on there with a little bit too much material in terms of how much you're putting down there. So what I'm going to suggest is you be a little bit more careful with that. Maybe put away your big brushes for this one, because it's really not going to be you're not going to be able to work within those small spaces very easily. The other thing I want to say is that don't feel like you got to get it all in one swoop sort of thing. This can kind of develop over time, so don't worry about kind of doing it all at once, okay? Take your time with it. You could do 1 layer down here and then do another layer over top of it once it dries. Most of the time we're going to do that. We're going to put down a base layer and we'll work over top of that base layer once it's dried. If our brushwork is a little rough or something, then the color underneath that, the base color, will show through and it won't look quite as choppy, okay? So I'm going to wet my brush up a little bit. I'm going to do some with this sort of fleshy coral color here. You can see as I put the water in there, it kind of thins it out a little bit more. Okay. Now I don't want too much on my brush. I just want to, what I'm doing right now is just kind of loosening it up with a little bit of water instead of the extender. I'm going to squash it down there and get the excess off of the brush. I don't want my brush to be all gobbed up like that. So clean it off here. use a piece of paper towel to wipe it. Get a little bit dry, and I'm just going to go in there and get a little tiny bit. Okay, like that much to start. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here. I put my brush, if I want to go down the edge, what I do is I put a little pressure on the brush. That'll help steady it, and then just pull it along that line. You know, you're constantly pulling. You're not pushing the brush around for the most part. A little bit more here. Get the brush in the corner, and then just pull it along. Be as careful as you can. The more exact you are with this, the more brush control you're going to have, the more you're going to be able to do with it. Spread it out. Don't just leave it all lumped up in one spot. Just spread it out. Basically, if you look at what I'm doing, I'm kind of not jumping into the paint right away. I'm going to spread out what I have. And then when I don't have any more on my brush, then I'll go back in there, grab a little bit more. Okay, go over top of it. Now your brush might end up drying out a little bit because this paper is going to suck up a lot of your water, at least in the first layer. So take your time. If you need to add a little tiny bit of water, just dip it in. You just get a little water from your bucket, and that will help keep it smooth. It'll actually help keep moving, much the way the extender does, but you'll have more control kind of bit by bit with that. Okay. Now once you do that, don't just start painting every, willy-nilly and all random. Take that, go to the opposite corner. I'm just going to go up here and do the same thing in that corner. A little bit of water in there. If you hover the brush over the line, it'll be all shaky. What you need to do is put a little pressure on it, push down, and that'll steady it. Again, if that first layer isn't perfectly opaque, and by that I mean if you're not seeing your perfect color, don't worry about it, because what this will do is it'll seal the surface. When you go for the second time, yes, the second time, then your color will be true. Okay? But this is the problem. Patience is going to be a huge part of making this work or having it not work. So you can see it loses a lot of its vividness as it goes onto the paper, and it sucks up a lot of this stuff. So the first layer is not really all that nice necessarily, but we'll get there. That just takes time. So I'm going to suggest that you dip in the water to kind of keep it moving. You don't want too much water. If you get too much water, what's going to happen is that then your paper is going to start bubbling up and rippling. Now I want to kind of keep my paper. I haven't taped it down because I want it to kind of flip it around and everything as I do this. But if you tape the paper down, it will stay flatter. It'll stay a little bit cleaner. But it's a little harder to manipulate. Now, if I go over my line here, it's not going to be life or death. But this is just something I'll have to come back later when I do the next square. I'll have to be a little bit more careful to try to get those lines clean. And a big part of this exercise is controlling your brush. Okay, so by the time you get through this, you're going to have a lot more brush control than you started out with. Now, I've mixed up a lot of paint here, so this isn't going to last very long. If I say I don't like this color in the end, now I wouldn't make any judgments yet, because what I would do is I'd put a bunch of it down and really see it with some other colors first. But say I didn't like this color and I wanted to change it. It's the beauty of acrylic paint. I let it dry, I come back over top of it with another color, and it's gone. So the nice thing about acrylic paint is it's very forgiving, and you can kind of change it constantly. And some of the lumpy stuff that happens initially will flatten out as the water dries, because it's just water inside of it anyway. Okay, so I'll kind of do that, go around it. You see this sort of symmetry going on there. I'll stop talking and then fast forward this after. I'm going to go in there. I'm going to go in there with more of that same color. I'm going to go in maybe I'll go into this area here. Now I can combine a couple of squares. I wouldn't suggest that you go in there and combine every square, because then you're not really going to get anything out of this exercise. If you need to combine a couple of squares to give yourself a bigger patch or something, or it looks, you like the look of that, then go for it. But if you're just doing it to save time and rush through this and not get any results, that's pretty much what you're going to end up doing, is not getting any results from this. This is something that's only going to work if you take your time and do it carefully. Because what you'll start seeing is, after you get X amount of this thing filled in, you're going to start seeing patterns emerge. You're going to start seeing color combinations that you like. You're going to see other things that you want to vary and change as you go along. But you won't see that if you rush through it and just glob paint on. You see where it went over the edge there? I'll come back later in the second round and go through it. Okay, so I've done this quarter here, so I want to kind of do this one in here now, since it has to be symmetrical. Now, the other thing about going in twice is that you are going to be able to correct anything. Now, when you get to other fluid mediums, like different types of inks and those sort of things, they behave very similar. Okay, the thing is about ink is much more delicate. You don't get a second chance really with ink. The difference between this and oil paint is, oil paint, the drying time is insanely slow. It's the advantage because it allows you to work on it steadily. But it is a very slow drying material, and it can be very messy if you've never used a fluid medium before. Now I'm starting to rush because my camera's going to run out of space and probably shut down on me. So rather than just keep adding paint, sometimes all you really want to do is wet your brush again. So what's happening is the paint starts to drag, and the tendency is to want to add more. Just wet your brush a little bit. Put that down there, or keep it moving. Okay, that'll keep it moving. I can keep brushing this around for a while. Okay, I'm going to do one more with this color, and then I'll change. Oh, that's pretty watery, so that will come up. That will come up. So at first you can make your choices random. But once you start seeing a pattern, then you're going to want to do something with that. I'm mixing some of these up as I go along. You just mix a bigger batch, so you're not mixing as you go. Eventually, once you're really comfortable with this paint, a lot of these initial steps that you do as a beginner will disappear, and you'll kind of jump ahead and modify them. But for now, stick to the pattern, do it the way I show you, and then once you start feeling really like you've got control over the material, then you can start trying different things with it. So just by virtue of this being a symmetrical design, you'll start to get a pattern. It's unavoidable. If you follow the steps, you'll end up with a pattern. And that pattern, after a while, will be something that, as you notice it, you're going to want to make changes to it. You're going to want to kind of orchestrate where the next sort of part of the pattern emerges. The other thing is that you can kind of go right in there and you can kind of reinvent the pattern. So if something's happening in the pattern in one area, but it's not happening in another, then you can block out and repaint areas and make them work the way you want it to. Okay. Right. Again, you sort of end up with something like that right now. Okay. What I'm going to do for a little bit, I'm going to kind of go into one of the darker, I'll go into the pure orange here, my pure coral color, and you can see it's still a little bit wet, so this stuff's still workable. This is starting to dry. I need to go in pretty soon and put a little bit of water like I just did. Let's see. I'm going to do this. Okay. And then to clean up the brushes, basically just take them like this, swish them in here, clean them off nice and good with some paper towel, put them into this one, swish them again, wipe them one more time. You can still see some residue. And again, the tinting of the brush tip, that won't matter. Maybe do it one more time, and you're pretty much good to go. If you want to, you could take some warm water and a little bit of dish soap and just kind of gently scrub the bristles, and that would be fine. But that should work for you. Okay, and again, it's once you start getting some of the patterns together and some of the colors starting to connect that you really start to see some of those shapes emerge. Once you start seeing maybe the square, or you want to pull it out, then go around the outside and emphasize the the lights and darks relationship. Ask yourself, why is this one area popping? Why is this other one area falling back? And then try to work with that. Okay? All right. Done. Good luck.